So I'm Janet Grove. I'm Mom's favorite child, and nobody else is in the room. So I wanted to give you a little story about Mom because she was different than most other moms we grew up with. And my young childhood, my friends made that very clear. Your mom is weird. And they didn't like to come to our house because when she barked in a way, and she cooked weird vegetables. You heard that all the time. No, let's go to my house and eat. I don't want to eat at your house. So she was born in Bidwell, California. How many of you know where that is? Okay, geography lesson. You know where Oregon, south side of Oregon, and the west side of Nevada? California corner, 15 miles south of Oregon, 15 miles west of Nevada. I looked it up on Google, so I know it's true. And she was born in January 29 of 1929, easy to remember, but it was a very dark and stormy night, and her Uncle Sid, loved to tell the story about how they couldn't get the cars going, so he had to go on horseback to get the doctor there.
It took 2 days.
2 days to get the doctor there. So Mom was the oldest of 4 kids, and like us, she has a baby brother, and his name's Ben, and he's sitting right here, so I can't say much about it, but we kind of think of him as the prince too, but he's like a great uncle. He treated Julie and I 100 times better than he treated his kids, and we loved that. But she had a great time. It was a very small town of 600 people in Cedarville. They lived in a log home that her father built, and there's a picture of it floating around. It recently sold for a lot more than it cost to build, and it's a very well-built home. And Julie and I talked, don't tell our husbands, about when it came up for sale, let's buy Grandma Ju and Pee-Pee's house. But our husbands, we liked them, so we didn't do that. If we'd gotten those part-time jobs doing wedding planning, we might have had enough money to do that. But Mom had 2 sisters, Lucille, who passed away in 2000, and Jamie Abel is here, son, lives in Wisconsin with his wife, Debbie. Recently had a wedding on a cruise, and last summer they had a son who got married in Lincoln, Nebraska. Where was Mother during that wedding? Right up front, treated like royalty. We took her to Nebraska to that wedding. And she was planning to go on the cruise, and I came home from Nebraska and I said, Kirk, I'm done, I'm not taking a cruise. So I took my second best person, and that's Alice back there. So, Mom's other sister, Patricia, lives in Arizona, and she couldn't be here. We're going to see her this summer. And what's interesting is Julie and I didn't know who Aunt Patricia and Aunt Lucille were for years. We just thought they're aunts we hadn't met. And then we found out that Aunt Lucille was Jimmy Lou, nickname, and that Patricia was Aunt Tatsy. We're like, oh, so we don't have 4 aunts. Mom doesn't have 4 sisters. Ben is here from California, and what year did we come out and see? Was that just 2 years ago? Mom and I flew out. Julie said I'd lost my mind, but that was years ago. So we had a great visit with him there. We met in Chicago with family, and then we met in Mattoon, and then again, right before Mom passed away last fall, you guys came out. That was great, thank you. And so Mom, in this town of Cedarville, was valedictorian of her high school class. She didn't tell us this. Dad was very proud of that. There were 12 people in the class. How many? Oh, 27, okay. Okay, correction on the statistics. In 1951, she graduated from San Jose State, married Dad, and moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She taught home ec for 2 years. I found her contract recently for $1,400 a year to teach. But then think about what a loaf of bread cost back then. And you didn't have a car. They were in an apartment where they shared a bathroom with other couples in other apartments. So, yeah, life was cheap back then. I asked her once for advice on picking a husband, and she was probably busy making a pie or something. She goes, well, I don't know. I can't imagine marrying someone you haven't known your whole life. Well, in Bloomington, Indiana, that's not common. But we claimed that she dated every guy in high school, like what Dad said. And Dad said he dated every girl, because there weren't that many. Dad was only, what, 5'8"?
5'7".
5'7", and he played basketball in high school. He made the varsity team because there were only 6 boys that they all had to be on the team. So this is where my parents come from. Last year, for the first time, Mom told me that in 1954, she had a little daughter named Julie who was about 9 months old, and she drove from Pennsylvania to California with another lady who got off in Idaho. And because Mom wanted to take this baby and show her to her mom. And then the following year, Mom had 2 kids. Because while Mom was out there alone, she found out she was pregnant again.
Oh.
Mom confessed she wasn't particularly happy about that. I'm scarred for life, but I got over it. And so when I came along the following summer, my mom's sister, Aunt Tatsy, graduated college, came back with her girlfriend in a convertible, drove from California to Pittsburgh, and Mom said, "You want to take Julie home?" And they took Julie back to California in the back seat of a convertible, probably front. No car seats, no seat belts. Remember that? Can you imagine that?
Puppy dog.
And a puppy dog. They got a puppy on the way. So Julie had a grand time. And they did tell Grandma Ju that they were coming. So when Tatsy and her friend got back to the log home, they said, "We got a present for you, and here's Julie." So Dad did fly out and help her drive home. And several times they drove nonstop through the night. They took turns driving. They wanted to go home and visit. Every 2 years of my childhood, we went to California, most of the time driving. And for you people under 50, let me just tell you, very few cars had air conditioning, and very few radio stations play in Utah and Nevada the last 5 days of the drive. So you 2 kids in the back seat, and later on 3. You were a big problem filling up that back seat.
The window.
No kidding. If Jeff wanted the window, Jeff got the window. Okay. After moving to Indiana in 1957, one of the best things, I can't imagine going anyplace better than Bloomington, or maybe Cedarville. Mom spent a lot of time outdoors, and those of you that know her, she liked to go foraging for mushrooms on the golf course. Watch out for golf. She liked to go looking for pawpaws and persimmons in the woods. She liked to go, they built a house but didn't have any money for landscaping, so we'd go out in the country, and she'd dig up daffodils in what appeared to be abandoned home sites. And she also liked to dig up rhododendrons and wildflowers in park-like settings throughout the country. National park-like settings. I can't believe she didn't get arrested for that. But you know what's interesting? She has some offspring that do similar things.
Yeah.
Julie, you're going to get caught in this case. We brought back driftwood, a giant piece of driftwood from Michigan one time, tied it to the back of the bumper on our camper. Fun times. And we camped all over, north, south, east, and west throughout the years of traveling to see our relatives and the rest of the world. Many times, Mom and the Hewitt family, the ladies would take their campers out and camp at Lake Monroe near here. And the guys, Dad and Amos, would commute to work every day. When I was in high school, I had to commute to work every day in the summer, but they loved camping, and we were outdoor people all the time. And I'm grateful for that. Now,
There's the log home.
pardon? Well, there's the log home. We used to address mail to Grandma June PD to, the Harris family at the White House. Yeah.
You put that in.
Okay, I just want to know, hey Jeff, what was her name that did that? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff because I told you everything that happened before he showed up. Because once he showed up, Mom had 2 built-in babysitters, and we had to go get jobs outside the house.
Thank you. That's going to be a hard. I didn't write anything down. So this is an interesting fact. I was born 9 years after Janet was. It was a shock to me when the neighbors told me I was an accident. My mom never confirmed to the very end whether I was an accident or not. I asked her on multiple occasions. She never told me. No biggie. Anyway, so she started back to work again in about 1974 when I was in the 5th grade. And she worked part-time for the Census Bureau. She worked the first half, she worked full-time for half the month. doing things like a national crime survey or a housing survey, and it allowed her to drive all over the parts of multiple counties, and she loved that job. She loved that job. She knew everywhere. She knew everywhere. She'd been there. It was kind of fun. One time when I was 12 or 13, she let me drive, because I went with her one afternoon. And we're driving on this country road, and she said, "Look out for that turtle." Crunch. "What turtle?" I gave her back the car. I didn't want to drive anymore. I hit a turtle. I felt terrible. But, she and Dad were very supportive parents for me growing up. The girls left when I was 9 years old. They both went to college by the time I was 9 years old. So that meant no more babysitters for Indiana basketball games. So I guess I get to go. So I got season tickets to Indiana basketball starting in the 4th grade. It was pretty cool. And Mom and Dad were very big fans. They loved going to games. And for football games as well as basketball games, and tailgating was a huge deal, as many of you know. If you've ever been, raise your hand if you've been to a Grove, McGuire, Hewitt tailgate party. The Hewitts are professional tailgaters, I will just say that right now. We're planning on tailgating sometime in the next year again.
September 13th.
13th of September, Indiana State at IU. Sorry, honey, I know I'm kind of springing that on you. This is one of the worst way that I spring things on you. Anyway, later on I got into running in high school, and they were big fans, and a lot of my friends from that, and my coaches here, Charlie Warthen and Mary Ann Warthen, big influences on me, and a lot of folks here, and Mom and Dad. They were very kind to Mom, and we would meet them for lunch halfway between Bloomington and Indianapolis. You did this recently a couple years ago. The story I'll tell about that is my senior year, I was sick and struggling a little bit. One race in Jasper, Indiana, is on these massive hills, and I just was having the worst day of my life. And I remember I'm going backwards in the race. People are just going by, I'm coming up this massive hill. I'm just struggling. And Charlie Warthen is right there, and he's like, "Get out of there. You're done. You stink today." So I dropped out. The one and only time I ever dropped out of a race. And I was really bummed, but we kind of hustled over the finish line when I got to see Marty Bassett and Ken Waterhouse duke it out to win the race. It was really exciting finish. Kenny just got Marty at the line. It was really cool. But the thing that I remember more about that race is afterwards, we had a tailgate party. My mom and dad showed up at every race. This race they had opened the back trunk of the car, and there was a cooler full of Gatorade and soda pop. And even at track meets or cross-country meets, when you drop out, there's still a tailgate party. And it was fantastic, and I drank some Gatorade and felt much better. It was just, they were there. They were always there. They whatever I did, they came to. So, anyway, she kept working with the Census Bureau even after I graduated from high school and into college. I can't remember, do you know when she stopped working for the Census Bureau? Did she retire? She retired when Dad retired. Well, they lived in Bloomington and loved living in Bloomington and going to games. And then at a certain point, they couldn't live in their house anymore, so they got a condo on the south side of Bloomington, not far from where we are right now. And they lived in this condo here on the south side of town. It was right next to a beautiful field, and they would put corn out and draw in deer and other wild animals, and they just loved spending their evenings watching the wild animals at this condo. And then when they couldn't drive anymore, we agreed that they would move up to Indianapolis to live near Julie and Doug, and they would move into retirement. And so they spent the last 10 or 15 years in Indianapolis just enjoying the sunset of their life, right? Things weren't perfect, but they were really pretty darn good. Many of you went to visit them there. I would come back, my family would come back, and they just had a very enjoyable end of life. And
Check 1, 2.
Check was the word better for. Yes. I don't mind talking loud. Can you hear in the back?
What?
Come on, Mr. Microphone. Check. I got to be really close. Okay, sorry. I don't want to spit on this thing. I feel for the next person coming up. Anyway, at the So towards the very end, Dad had passed away, and we moved Mom into a hospice care in Mattoon, Illinois, because it was a very nice facility, and Julie and Doug they had been very, very busy with lots of grandkids and other things, so it was Janet's turn to be the primary caregiver, and this was a great facility, and she enjoyed being there for about a week. I was able to fly back, and one night we had the great idea that we were going to make a steak and lobster dinner. Janet and Kirk made steak and lobster. We took it over to the facility. Mom got up out of her bed, and we went to the dining area, and there was another family down there, so we shared steak and lobster dinner at this hospice care facility, and Mom enjoyed it. The next day, she was super tired and didn't get out of bed, and that night she passed away. So it was a great end of life, and my mom had steak and lobster for dinner the night before she died, which was fantastic. And I'm not sad. This is not a sad day. This is a celebration of a life well lived, both she and my dad. So thank you all for being here. And I think, are we doing mic sharing now? Is that what we're doing? If anybody'd like to come up and share a story.
Oh, I have to ask, when did we go back? What year did we move? 96? Okay, so, Mike, is this on?
Yeah, really close.
Okay, oh. So in 1996, James and I moved out to Indiana from Arizona, from Tucson, where all our family was. And it was just us and my little daughter Ellen, and it was pretty lonely. We were in Columbus, so across the mountain. And James was like, my Aunt Joyce lives over in Bloomington. And so we came over to visit Joyce and Lou. And it was amazing. It was a whole new family, and it was this opportunity to meet and get to know her. And I was actually pretty close with James's mom, and so it was just very, very special to suddenly have, Joyce and Lou that we could go visit anytime that, the house flooded. We had, water up to the front door, and I had to be boated away by the police. I could get the ride into the police station and call James, and he said, let's just go over and see Joyce and Lou. So it was super special, and it's one of the best things that ever happened to us about moving to Indiana, was that we got to be close to a whole new section of family that we hadn't had before. So.
I think you need to hear from the son-in-laws, okay, or the outlaws, but I think Kirk and I can both say Joyce was an amazing gal that we just loved dearly. Just to tell you, one of the best things in my life was to meet Julie and convince her she should go for a date with me. And after we'd been dating for a while, I was invited over to the house one afternoon. It was a Sunday afternoon. And for a guy who was living with another guy in an apartment cooking for ourselves, I thought I was in heaven. So I go over there, and the first person I see as I drive up is this young kid shooting hoops. And being a guy from Indiana, I'm going to go shoot some hoops as well. Turns out it was Jeff. And I spent quite a bit of time out there. They probably wondered why I wasn't coming in, but by the time we were done, I had Jeff in my corner. So then I had to walk into the house and face the parents, which I'd never done before. This was the first time.
Remember that day.
Yeah. And I tell you what, they accepted me wholeheartedly. In fact, Julie told me later that she kind of gets upset with her mom because whenever she'd bring a boyfriend over, Joyce would just corner them in a back room and they'd start talking, and we had a great time. Well, over the next year, about every Sunday afternoon, I went over there and had dinner. And by the time I finished, I started out my senior year at 6'2", 135 pounds, if you can believe it. But I was wiry, I was tough, I was a tennis player. And then when I graduated, I was 165. And so I subsequently went to a high school reunion, and they had us all stand up, and they said, okay, how many of you gained 5 pounds? How many of you gained 10 pounds, 20 pounds? 30 pounds. And suddenly I'm still standing. And there's only two of us standing. One was a pregnant woman and me. That was it. And so I owe it to my mother-in-law, who was a great cook. But I also got to tell you, she loved to party, and I did too. One of my favorite pictures is at our first anniversary, her 25th anniversary, and your parents' 50th anniversary. We were just at Golden's with this stupid look on our face, like we've been drinking. The next picture is she's sitting on the curb, and I'm sitting going, that was a hell of a night. We had lots of fun throughout the years. As she got older, she got a little grouchy. And, it's tough going through COVID when you can't even see your family. It's tough, really tough. And she lived through that. I'd go in and she would be mean and upset, but I'd tell her a story about her grandkids. And I'd get her smiling, her great grandkids. So, love that woman dearly. Kirk, where's Kirk? She's a heck of a mother-in-law, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Who's next?
Her parents were the ones that put on those great tailgate parties.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Hewitt, and Kathy my sister was just telling me 3 things I need to say too, so this is my buzz. One, when I was thinking about memories, Jeff, do you remember the green bug, the beetle or whatever you call it, the Volkswagen bug? And we'd get crammed into the tiny space in the back, and Joyce took us to swim lessons and then always took us out for a treat after that. But it was very dangerous to be in the back of that tiny little Volkswagen, I believe above the engine, right? Because we're in the back then. But she'd also, our moms were similar. They both had bites. They both really liked to cook. They both really liked to have fun. And Jeff, I'm sorry that you didn't figure out a long time ago that you were in an accident, because I had it figured out a long time ago that we were both accidents. And while Jeff was always thought of as the prince, I was a princess, and it just wasn't true. I was not treated like a princess by my siblings. I was treated meanly by my siblings. And I suspect Jeff had some mean moments with his siblings too. Just Julie, apparently. But when I reflect on our childhoods, if you've ever seen the series Mad Men, I really feel like the furniture was our furniture, the parties were like our parents had, with the big punch bowl in the middle of the table. And we can't find that punch bowl. It must have gotten sold in auction, but I have this dream of finding one and filling it with whiskey sours, not punch. But our parents raised us well and raised us to understand the importance of family and community. You don't see that very often. And we had continuity. We had stability. And for that, I know my siblings and I are always grateful. And it is true that Kathy's hosting a tailgate on September 13th. So if you can make it, everybody's invited, right, Kathy? So here are her 2 stories. One, who knew that Joyce Grove used to call her in sick to high school so she could go out and do whatever she wanted, like Joyce Grove did that. She would never have done that for me. She's the last person I would have ever asked to call me in sick to high school. And then Kathy was sharing me a story. She couldn't remember what event it was, but Joyce and Rod Fauser went to Kroger to pick up a bunch of fried chicken for whatever the event was. And they bought a bottle of wine, opened it up, and sat there and drank it. And then I used to go visit Joyce whenever I was in town. And one time, Blue was still alive, and one time she went over and she opened her fridge and I can't even remember what it was hidden in, but there was wine in something that wasn't a wine bottle. And she was like, "Don't tell my children this, especially Doug." But she had figured out a way. The woman who came to clean her little apartment brought her wine, and she outlived everybody, so I don't really think that made much of a difference. Anyway, she was all of our second moms, and I really appreciate growing up in a situation where I had a second mom.
I gotta tell one story real quick.
My son, Ben, played AAU basketball. Julie was on the travel team, but they went out to Nevada, Las Vegas, and had a tournament. And Mimi Joyce went along. Well, guess what? She's playing the slots every day, and she comes back with money. And all the boys said, Mimi Joyce, would you take some money and play slots? And she came back with money for all these guys. They loved her. That was my mother-in-law.
I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Jean Tokarek, and I came into this crowd as Julie's roommate at IU. And we have been friends ever since, and that's how I got to know Joyce. And I wanted to tell you that I think Jeff had mentioned that she had worked for the Census Bureau. Joyce also had a second job. She was on the corporation board of our sorority, Gamma Phi Beta, and she was always being called in. We were having problems with our house mother, or there was something going on with the house, or people lost their keys, and Joyce was the go-to person who came to the house. And like some other people, I felt like she was a second mother to us, and something that I will never forget. The last thing I want to say is Joyce was a very astute mom, and it was either one of her children or one of her grandchildren, and I won't tell you who. She knew which ones were drinking underage.
Only college.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Joyce's brother. I didn't know her when I was growing up. And then when I graduated from college, I in the Army Reserves that I was stationed in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. On my transfer back to California, I made a side trip to Indiana. It was the first time I really got to know my sister. She was a lifesaver. I thought. Okay, closer? Okay. Anyway, from that point on, we became very close. We traveled together as a family. Our families traveled together. We spent many fun times in Mexico, at the 7 Mile Beach in the Caribbean. And then after our children were grown, we traveled together as adults. We had more fun than you can imagine. And the last few years, I talked to Joyce almost every day. I considered her one of my best friends. Thank you.
It was returned. She considered you her best friend.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Young, Jennifer Cobb Young. Janet and I were best friends when we were growing up. And if Janet wasn't at my house, I was at Janet's house. And to be perfectly honest, Joyce scared the shit out of me. Because my mother was a yeller, and Joyce was a yeller. And so that wasn't what scared me. It was that she was always yelling about something that I didn't understand. Like, eat this. At least when my mother said, eat this, I knew what it was. And I hated vegetables. And they were always serving weird vegetables at their house. And I was afraid to not eat it because I was scared of her. So mealtime was always frightening at my house because I hated vegetables. But it was even scarier at Janet's house because they were weirder vegetables. But anyway, Joyce was lovely, and I felt very at home at her house. And Janet always loved coming to my house because I always had ice cream in the freezer. And we were wild and woolly, and we climbed trees and played in the woods and did things that children today aren't allowed to do. And Janet and I have always said that we were way before our times. And when Joyce and Lou got moved up to Indianapolis, I was so happy because my mom passed away at a very young age. And so getting to visit Joyce was like seeing my mother again. And it made my heart so happy to see her and to reminisce with her because she and my mother were very best friends. And Janet and I, when we were kids, we would congratulate each other saying, aren't we so smart to have been friends and get our moms together? And so we thought we were just magicians having done that. So Joyce was a very influential person in my life. And I loved Lou because he was a strong and silent type and always just like, yup, I'll do whatever you say. Yup. And he was just such a nice guy, and he never ruffled anybody's feathers. And he was a strong and silent type kind of dad that kind of I didn't have. And I mean, I had a father, but my dad he was kind of explosive. And so I really valued the Grove family for giving me something I didn't have. And I will miss Joyce dearly.
Okay, so I am not from around here. I'm Jeff's wife, Christiana. Let me change that. I'm the prince's wife. So if you can imagine when you were talking about your hesitancy, when I met Joyce, she was rather intimidating, I will say.
I would think so.
Well, I was a little bit older. She was still intimidating. But I remember that I was new, didn't know anything about the Midwest. I'm a West Coast girl, didn't know anything about the Midwest. And so, and they would take me around town and I'd hear all the stories about all the places. And some of you people probably in here that you don't even know I know the stories. But so she made me feel more and more comfortable. But what I remember most is the day that Jeff and I got married. Again, chaos ensued. And again, some of the people around the room, I remember. And so we had a really wonderful time. It was quite a party. And we all spent the afternoon. We were on a boat, and I think we all got to know each other a lot better. But I remember later in the day, she grabbed me and gave me a very large hug and told me that I was a keeper. And I was very touched by that because Joyce had a wall. You had to get through the wall, and it really meant something to me. She was a very sweet woman.
Anybody else? Rachel? You want to come up here?
Okay. Well, my name's Rachel, and I'm Julie and Doug's youngest daughter, standing bright and light. So there's a lot of things I could say. I did write actually a page of things, but I wanted to let everybody share something because it's fun to hear everybody's stories about Grandma. And for me, I think the fondest memories are I was blessed of all of the other Pitts children to get to spend, I think, the most time at Grandma and Grandpa's house. every summer I got dropped off for, it was at least a week at their house. I don't remember when that began, but I was very, very small, but it left a very strong impression on my heart. And I forever dearly, dearly loved Grandma and Grandpa and their home. Have so many fond memories of their house in Bloomington. And just a couple little memories. Grandma's epic glass bird collection. That was a fun one. Grandpa collecting his elephants. He had a fondness for those. I thought it was a pretty interesting contrast. We have glass birds and elephants. Grandma and Grandpa, I think, were, in my mind, a picture of contrast in the extreme. Grandma's personality was quite frightening to many, and but for some reason, when I was a child, she didn't scare me at all. I just dearly loved Grandma, and I actually benefited in some ways. She would give me 25 cents every time I was there, whenever she would say a word that you weren't supposed to say around children. So I like that. Another fun thing was the happy pills. I don't know if anybody else knew about them. But those were fun. They weren't anything special. They were just, candy from the store. Just, little orange. I forget what those things are. I don't know if they make them anymore. Tic Tacs. Tic Tacs, yeah. So anytime you weren't happy at Grandma's, you had to have a happy pill. So she really taught us well. And another word that was equivalent to a cuss word was bored. So I was never allowed to say I'm bored. I think I would be forced to take many happy pills. But I really don't ever remember being bored at Grandma's house. Grandpa would take me to the model store where you can pick out, you want to build a model car, you want to build a model airplane. And he had his tool shed and his, place out there. So I had so much fun building things. And it was just such a heavenly place for me as a child. I think waking up in the morning on Saturday, and I'm not making this up, it was like I would wake up and the window was open and you could hear the birds chirping outside. It was the most beautiful sound. I think they had special bird feeders to draw many birds to their house, because, I don't typically hear that many birds chirping where I live now, and I could smell Grandma cooking away in the kitchen, blueberry pancakes, and would go in there and read the funnies with Grandpa Lou and drink tea and eat blueberry pancakes and just have a blast. I dearly, dearly love Grandma and Grandpa Lou. And just one fun fact about Grandpa Lou that I never knew growing up, because what I heard from Grandpa Lou was always basically the same story over and over again. You all know about that. He was really good at telling the same stories, but I never really got details in those stories. So I think I was too little when he was able to really maybe tell the detailed stories, and then when I got old enough to care, it was kind of like harder to communicate. His hearing, went downhill, and it was hard. But fun story I didn't know was that Grandpa Lou actually visited Iran, which is pretty cool, and went on a mission to bring electricity to Iran through Westinghouse. And I thought that was the most fascinating story, because I've had a heart to be a missionary in the Middle East, and I was like, my family's already been to Iran. What? I didn't know this. Grandpa Lou, oh my gosh. So, so many fun things. I could just ramble on and on, because I got to spend so much time with them, and it was really special. And I did get to see Grandma towards the end and spend more time and get to kind of know her more, and that was also very special to me. And I wanted to share, nobody shared the story, but I thought it was very touching, the last moments of her life, and it was so peaceful. And I think maybe it was Aunt Jan or someone shared about how one of the nurses had come in and she was breathing very heavily and struggling to breathe. But then she just got very calm, I believe, and laid back in the bed and said it looked like she was looking at someone who had come to visit her, someone that she had known, someone that she felt comfortable with, that she felt at home with. And she looked at, and she just said to the nurse, I believe it was like, oh, I have to go. And then she just laid back and passed. And so we don't know who that person was, and maybe it was Grandpa Lou, maybe it was Jesus, but someone that she knew deeply had come for her, and I just thought that was so comforting, you know. And I know I'm going to see Grandma again in heaven, and got to know more about her faith too. So yeah. Thank you guys for coming. I didn't know I was doing that much, but I didn't know. I feel like I love Grandma more than anyone. So. I feel like I have the right. Sorry.
Okay, so another granddaughter follow-up. Rachel's stories were beautiful, so it's a tough act to follow. I'm from the West Coast. We all live out there now.
Who are you?
What?
Who are you?
Oh, I'm Erin. I'm Jeff's daughter. Yeah, so I'm also familiar with the prince. He acts that way around the house. It's really fun for all of us. But I also was a fan of the Happy Pills when I was a kid. I was known by my other grandparents as Baby A-Bomb, just because my moods fluctuated a lot as a child. I would get very, very grouchy all of a sudden. And because I lived on the West Coast, I didn't get to see Mimi and Papa quite as often as a lot of people here maybe did. But what I always remember is they would come to Washington right around Thanksgiving every year. And I always remember that it was a very exciting time for me because that was really when I got away with a lot more. And my bedroom was right across the hall from where they always stayed. And so yes, I would get the Happy Pills, and so I was always in a much better mood when they were in town because it meant I got a lot of Tic Tacs, and I was a big fan of those. But also what I remember is there's a park near our house, and it's really overrun with blackberries. And as an adult, this is something that's kind of a pestilence, but when I was little, all I remember about it is it was always perfect because right around when they came, that would be the time of year when the blackberries were in season. And so Mimi and I would always go down and we would pick blackberries, and then she'd help me make a cobbler. I say help me make, but we all know who was doing all the work. But I always remember that she was a very good inspiration for me growing up because she was always a very honest person in the best possible way. But, you know, I know a lot of times with kids, you're kind of boiling things down, and she was always just very frank with me, and I always remembered that it was, you know, we would spend that time making those berry cobblers together, and I always remember that that was one of my favorite things. And when we would come out here, I remember a lot about when we would go visit their house. Papa Lou, as many of you know, was an ice cream fiend. And so I always loved coming to their house, twofold, because we could go downstairs in the basement. They had their little bar, and so I would always take all the mini alcohol bottles and I'd put them on a tray and I'd play waitress. And then also because we would always do chocolate mousse runs. And I remember there were many times where we got to have 2 chocolate mousse runs a day when it was with Papa. So my brother and I were just talking about that. Even when there were storm warnings, he was still like, well, we haven't had our second chocolate mousse run. So I always remember that that was a priority. Ice cream was always a priority when we came to visit Mimi and Papa. So I will leave it to somebody else. But yeah, lots of fond memories with those two.
Yeah. Julie. Come on.
Who are you?
So, Prince, which I think makes me like the Duke of York. But like Erin said, you know, we didn't always have the pleasure of getting to see Mimi and Papa all the time, living on the other side of the country. But it was always very, very special when they got to visit, and it was a really exciting time when they would come around Thanksgiving every year. And one of my favorite memories as a kid was You know, being I was really into baseball most of my life, and it was a rare, really nice day out in the Pacific Northwest in November, believe it or not. And as things are, being at sea level, the air is quite heavy. The ball does not carry. There was even a name for this, the marine layer, the infamous marine layer. And so I would be playing baseball in the backyard by myself, just tossing up the ball and trying to hit home runs like Barry Bonds, 2002. And Mimi Joyce was just taking in the beautiful day out on the back deck, and I hit an absolute missile right down the left field line, off the house, and straight into her face. I think the maybe interrupted the kind of the nice moment she was having on this beautiful day a little bit, but she was resilient, and as she watched me getting frustrated, as I was hitting these balls and kind of they were falling, just like we had these 3 birch trees in right field, deep into right field territory, right? And I had this habit of just hitting the ball the other way, right into the trees, and it would just drop down, and I'd get robbed of my home run. Mimi Joyce, even in a road game, she wasn't hesitant to lay down some new ground rules and said, well, if you hit the ball into the trees, it's simply a 3-tree home run. And from that day forward, it just became a 3-tree home run. And I think, I was thinking about this, and I think there's a lesson in that if you just take a step back for a moment and you look at it through a little bit of a different angle, you realize that you've been hitting home runs the whole time. If you're not so attached to exactly what your idea of what that really looks like. So, love Mimi Joyce a great deal, and she had a profound impact on my life. I'll miss her here.
Did I hear a Julie? Julie?
So, I'm Julie, the first and oldest child, but I will tell you, I picked a college major that didn't require speech. So, this is not my favorite thing to do, but you can hear me. So anyway, I'm up here speaking under duress. But probably my 2 favorite stories of my mom were, one is she loved to take us woodsy, and I love being outside, and you go out and you dig up daffodils in Brown County from some old homestead, and you bring them home, put them in the backyard. And I still love doing that kind of thing. And you go out driving, and you'd lay in the back window looking for persimmon trees out by Lake Monroe. So we could stop and pick up 10 persimmons. That's how few you found, but that was some fun memories. And of course, there was a time when the lady next door, Doris McGuire, who didn't have a driver's license, so we'd go out with Doris and the kids, the McGuires, and we got stuck in the creek bed because the water was too high driving, and we had to call a tow truck to get us out before the husbands got home from work. So it was fun experiences. But probably the best thing my mom did is she, number one, made me take typing in high school, and I kept saying, I am not going to be a secretary when I grow up. No way. They had shorthand in high school, and a lot of girls I knew took shorthand because they thought they'd work in an office. I know some of my friends worked for my dad at Westinghouse when they got out of high school. But she made me take typing, and the only argument that worked was, I am not going to type your term papers when you get to college. And I said, fine. But today, when I'm sitting at my laptop and I'm typing away, and Doug is going like, thank you, Mom. Take typing. And the other one is probably, I was living at home my freshman year of college because it was cheap. And why wouldn't you live at home, And she made me go through rush. In fact, I missed regular fall rush. She gave me a check and said, you have to go find this office in the student union building. It's up on the 4th floor, and give this check and sign up for rush. So I did, and I managed to get to Carrick. So there's, who was from Terre Haute, same as my husband. So we kept in touch, and those are probably some of the best things about my mom. Other than she was a really good cook, but I never was in the kitchen cooking with her. I was in the basement ironing my dad's shirt. She said, would you like to be helping cook or iron? Oh, I'll go iron. So that's all I have to say.
I am Sarah, and my maiden name was Cox. My mother and Joyce were very, very good friends, and they were the two old ladies that worked for the government. And there were so many stories that revolved around some of their capers just with working for the government. And I'm sure that there were a lot of flowers dug up and replanted also on Brown Cliff as well as on Skyline Drive during those times. And it's also, I know it's been said that as long as a person's name is spoken and stories are told, that they will be alive. So I'm here to tell you, Joyce Grove will live forever. And my niece, who is right back here, might have been one of Joyce's earliest bartenders. I believe she was 2.5 or 3 when Joyce took the time to patiently explain to her how to count out the gin and put in the tonic and just how much lime. Is that correct, Allison? Yeah, just how, and then how to quickly bring it and sit with attention toward them in case it got a little low or you could hear the ice rattling in the glass. It was time for Allison to hit the road and go back to the bar, and she served from the bar on Skyline Drive and also on Brown Cliff quite frequently. And I think that her first thing that she would say whenever she saw Joyce and Lou is, "What are you drinking tonight?" So she was always also willing to pour a glass of wine. So, but one of my very favorite stories that I've heard both Joyce and my mother tell on several occasions is, as I said, they worked for the government, and oftentimes there were trainings, so they would have to go and stay in a hotel and train, and a lot of times it was in Chicago. And my mom and Joyce got off of the elevator, and they noticed that there was a bench that said, "Wet paint, do not touch." So you know this story, don't you, Julie? Immediately, they both took their hands, placed them on the paint, and proceeded to go up and down the hall, putting both of their hands on every single door, except their own. So it's kind of how they did things. But again, as Janet said earlier, they never got arrested. And speaking of Janet, we were talking earlier about when I thought it was Kizzy, but very unfortunately, it was actually one of Janet's cats, Hickory, that Janet dried in the dryer.
No, Mom did.
Oh, excuse me, I didn't mean Janet, I meant Joyce. So, stroked brain, sorry. But at any rate, yeah, there will always be stories to tell, and I'm just glad that I got to commemorate her with a couple. So, who's next?
Thank you. Yeah. Closing statements.
Clothing stations.
Everybody, here.
We got lots of food to eat here.
I gotta do this, thanks. Throw me under the bus.
You're the prince.
I'm the prince, okay, yeah. Well, now that she's dead, does that make me the king? Oh, bad. Oh, boo. Come on, heckling.
Off with his head.
All right, I'll tell you, I've got a few more stats for you then. She was almost 100 years old, right? 95. So 365 days times 100 years, that's 36,000 days, a few less than that. So maybe 35,000, 34 and change. 34,000 days, probably the first 4,000 don't count. 30,000 days as an adult. She probably said damn 30,000 times. All right, here's a trivia question. What was her favorite card game? What was her favorite card game? Answer in the back. Gin Rummy. Good guess. No. Another guess?
Solitaire.
Solitaire. That would be very high up later in life, but we're not gonna, that biases the late life.
Bridge.
I'm gonna say Oh Hell was her favorite card game. Am I right? You don't know, you guys don't know that game. Okay. All right. It might have been
After my son.
after your time, yeah, okay. It was in the cuss word theme. So I'll tell you one more story. When I was in the first grade,
I had an elderly first grade teacher, Mrs. Gilpatrick, and I loved her. It was her last year of teaching. And you had Mrs. Gilpatrick? She was fantastic. I loved her. You had Mrs. Oh, I guess we were, yeah, I'm sorry, we were in the same first grade class. Anyway, so we're in circle time one day, and the question was talking about what different dams there were. Yeah, you know where this is going. And somebody said, well, you know, there's the Hoover Dam, this big concrete dam, and somebody else said there's a Beaver Dam. And of course, I had to pipe up in my autistic wisdom and say, well, there's another kind of dam. And Mrs. Kilpatrick was like, what? And I'm like, the dam that you say when you're mad. She's like, get out of here. I sit in the corner. I got in trouble. So, you know, that's life with a woman that's a very strong-willed, out there woman. And you know, we all know her that way. So I think one of the things that I've talked to my kids about is I don't want you to remember my parents as they were at the end, right? You know, Papa Lou, who had Alzheimer's very bad, and he couldn't see and he couldn't hear, but that's just the end of his life. He was a very capable man when he was younger, even later into life. And Mimi, fortunately, was very, Mimi, by the way, that's what the grandkids generally called her, was Mimi. She was very with it until the very end. Very lucky. We should all be so lucky to have our intellect in the way that she had her intellect to the very end. So, you know, I guess that's my closing wish for all of us. Let's live our lives at the end of our lives as best we can, right? Our parents showed us what the end of life looks like. And it's not, growing old is not for sissies. But it can be enjoyable, and it can be awesome, and it can be fun. So let's live our lives well and end them on a high note.
Amen.
Thank you.